Ben, good morning, and thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Executive Coffee Club. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very happy to have you. You're not only a great former colleague, but also a close friend. We know each other for so many years, right?
We do, yes, indeed. About 15, 16 years, something.
16 years, yeah. We worked together in Kuwait, and then we started quite a great relationship that turned into friendship.
Indeed, which is wonderful, isn't it, in work when you work with people you like and respect, and they become friends as well as colleagues, so
Absolutely. And your work was absolutely inspirational for me and for many others. And we will get, more into this later on. But before that, can you share with us a little bit what's your background, where you come from, and what you've done to be so successful in your career? There is a common ground. What was the history that made the man we know?
Well, briefly, I was born in France of a French mother, Algerian father. Spent my first 7 years in France and started primary school, and then moved to Algeria, where I did the rest of my primary and secondary education. But my dream while I was growing up in Algeria as an adolescent was to go abroad, to travel. And so I applied for at the time, government scholarships to study abroad. And you couldn't choose where you were sent, but I was lucky. I was successful in getting the scholarship, and I was sent to the United Kingdom, where I went to university, and I studied engineering. And that was, I guess, the educational grounding of myself as a human being. And then when it was time to decide what to do with my life, my career, I didn't really want to work in the oil industry, and I ended up during my studies. I took little jobs in restaurants to supplement my small bursary. And I was working in restaurants, and actually I enjoyed it. And so when I graduated university, I decided to stay in the food service industry. That was the beginning of my career.
And that's very interesting. So what is attracting you really in the hospitality industry? Is it the people? Is it the way to serve? Is it the mindset of the customers? What is it?
I think it was a mixture, really. It was a tough job. You work physically very hard, long hours. You didn't get paid very much, but and many people didn't really enjoy the work. They worked because they had to earn a living, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed working with people, team members, colleagues, to deliver great hospitality experiences, and I enjoyed the interaction with the clients in trying to understand what they wanted and delivering, to their expectation, problem solving, all these things. I wasn't thinking in those terms when I was doing it, but obviously I was enjoying the experience. And so, hospitality quickly became something I wanted to explore further.
Thank you very much. So you had a fantastic career, and that included at the end, a very interesting position in the Hilton, covering many countries and managing a very large number and supporting a very large number of staff. Can you let us know a little bit what was, the legacy and what was the impact that you made to the different people you were leading?
Yes. It's, I don't like to think in terms of legacy, because I think that's probably, slightly, it would be slightly boastful to think in those ways. I think I approach my work in generally a fairly simple way. And certainly when I started working human resources, my first job in human resources was in training. And I really enjoy the process of helping people grow, helping people explore their potential, helping people think of ways to achieve their potential, their goals, around work and beyond. And I always used to think that if I could make a small contribution to that process, then that was worthy, and it was something I enjoyed enormously. So I don't want to necessarily think about legacy, but certainly I helped people become more confident about their possibilities, their potential, their talent, and be able to not only leverage that talent to build a career, but also make a contribution that they could be proud of. And I think, while I wasn't always thinking in those terms while I was doing the work, that's really how I made my contribution. So I don't know whether that's legacy, because I guess, the moment you leave a job, and in my case, it was retiring from full-time employment, you're pretty quickly forgotten, really. So what's left behind is little traces, maybe, of, we worked that way with Ben, and that was positive, and let's keep it, But
Yes, you're very humble. What was the scope of your responsibility at Hilton?
So my last job was Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Europe, Middle East, Africa. So it was 80,000 employees across 70 countries, approaching 1,000 hotels. Clearly, some of those hotels were franchise hotels, so we had very little to do with those, but the 350 or so hotels we managed, and then some of our corporate employees in the regions was part of my responsibility to support.
Very good. So what were the major, kind of levers or orientations or big works that you implemented throughout your career, especially at the end where you had that very large responsibility?
I think the biggest part of my responsibility was to implement Hilton's culture across all of the hotels, all of the corporate offices, and we were growing very fast. So we were opening new hotels, and every time you open a new hotel, you had to deliver the brand, whether it was a Hampton by Hilton or a World of Astoria and everything in between. When I was there, we had 23 brands. I think now Hilton has got to 25. And, for the customer experience to be consistent across the world, across each one of those brands. And at the same time, my responsibility was to ensure that the employee experience was also consistent with our universal principles of, our purpose, our values, the way we operated, and the absolute vision of Conrad Hilton, which we still used in our purpose platform of, the travel industry, the hospitality industry can make travel can help the world be a better place, essentially.
Sure. But your scope was the EMEA and especially the Middle East as well. I know you have been, working in several companies in the Middle East. And at some point you were based in Kuwait, you were based in Dubai. One question about the differences between managing in the Middle East and from an employee point of view, what would be the differences between, leading outside of the Middle East and leading a team within the Middle East?
I believe that you deal with human beings, and that's pretty universal, wherever you are in the world. But the biggest sort of difference working in the Middle East is that the vast majority of your team members are expatriates. They come from different parts of the world, mostly from Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. And I think the biggest challenge was that you're often working in a hotel or in a retail environment with 60, 70 different nationalities, different cultures, different religions, different habits, different languages. And I think that's the biggest difference. Even though Europe is becoming more and more diverse from a cultural standpoint, certainly the Middle East was the extreme.
Yes.
And it was an extraordinary process to learn about how to operate in that environment successfully. And I think it's still the case today. That's probably the biggest challenge.
And what were the challenges in terms of diversity and inclusion, for example?
Well, I think, initially, the culture in the Middle East was many people came to the Middle East because they had, social, economic, lots of different challenges in their own countries. And the only way they could look after their families, and in some cases to look after their communities, was to find a job in the Middle East. And even though many of those jobs would have been quite low paid, hard work, difficult conditions at the beginning, it's much different now. They would make a significant contribution to their families and their villages back home. And so you had to take that into account when you thought about how to implement what you wanted to implement in your business.
If you had to give some advices or some suggestions to someone starting his career or her career in the hospitality sector in the Middle East, what would it be?
I mean, generally, I always like to keep things aspirational and positive. So I would say, you might go through some difficult times, difficult and challenging times when you start in the Middle East, because you have to understand how to operate in this multicultural environment, and the conditions might be different from your own country, but you have to take that on board. And keep sight of what you want to try and achieve with your career. And the possibilities are limitless, because in this part of the world, in the Middle East, it's a land of opportunity. And if you work hard, if you deliver great results in your job, if you show ambition in the right way, respectful and so on, you can achieve everything you want to in life.
So it's about success. So how would you define success? What would make the career of one more successful, for example, than the career of someone else?
Well, I think it's mostly a function of talent and potential, but it's sometimes also a function of luck. You have to be there at the right place. Someone taps you on the shoulder, or you're just there when they need someone with your skills and experience. So there's a small element of luck, but it's mostly about you. And I've always believed, and certainly that's how I've conducted my professional life. If you work hard, opportunities. If you work hard and deliver results, opportunities come your way. You sometimes have to have sufficient confidence to raise your hand, and say, hey, I'm here. What's next for me? And in my mentoring work over the years, and even today, I encourage people to have sufficient confidence to say that, because it's not always that people will tap you on the shoulder. Sometimes you have to signify quite clearly that you have ambition.
So thank you. That's very interesting. So you mentioned mentoring. So what's your activity right now? I know you're no longer part of the Hilton. You are based in the UK right now, but you're focusing on different things, including mentoring and coaching, and also doing some degrees of, support of HR transformation. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, so that we really understand your current stage of your career?
Well, I mean, first of all, I chose to retire from Hilton. I was approaching 70 years old, and I thought I'd worked for 50 years, and it was time to slow down a little bit, maybe do something different. When you're a senior executive in an organization, it's pretty full on, as it should be. You're well looked after, well rewarded, and there's a high expectation. And there's a point at which you may not be completely sort of able to go full on. And it was time to slow down just a little bit and maybe do some different things, spend a bit more time with family and so on. And so what I wanted to do is to develop a small portfolio of activities to just keep me intellectually active and to try and make some contribution somewhere. So I do a little bit of coaching and mentoring. And I have done work for an organization called Business Leaders, where I am one of the facilitators of CEO forums. So it's CEOs from small and medium-sized enterprises in the UK that get together to discuss problem solving, to discuss issues, to share experiences and get informed on how to build their business, how to grow their business in an efficient and fast way. So I do a little bit of work with those organizations. I also do some non-executive work. So I'm an independent member of the board of Which and the Consumer Association in the UK. So, I'm reasonably active. Perhaps I could be more active, but I've only just started a few months ago, so I'm quite happy with how things are going.
Very good, very good. So what's your approach of coaching and mentoring? Some people have, methodologies and follow some type of, standard approaches, or they're not. So what's your view on this, and how do you implement it? What's your style?
I think there's room for education, and there's room for systems, and there's room of for processes, of course, and I'm very respectful of that. I have some beliefs about coaching and mentoring, which are that the simpler you can keep, the more focused you are on your customer, on your client, the more into their success you are, more than you are about your success, the better the solution. And so I try to keep things client-focused and simple. I also have a fundamental belief that my job isn't to keep my client dependent on me. I know that's quite controversial in some corners, but I don't want to be a coach of one person for life unless they need coaching for life. But that's very unusual. Or it says something about your coaching if they're dependent on you for life. So I want them to become independent and for the coaching to become lighter and lighter as time goes. And so that's my philosophy, and I have a strong view about that.
So, but it's not very clear for me. When do you think someone should rely on, support from a coaching, mentoring point of view? Do you think anybody at any stage of their career should go there and ask for support, or it's only when you have some issues and you find yourself some really great support from a coaching, mentoring point of view? Or is it systematic? Everybody would need someone, or not. So, what's your view on this?
Well, I think at some point in your career, you would always benefit for some coaching and some guidance. But I don't know that you need coaching all the time, all of your life.
Yeah.
And some people might think that the opposite. My personal view is you want to build independence. And I have done a bit of coaching and mentoring for people that just occasionally might give you a call and want to bounce something of you. And that's not really coaching, that's just part of the relationship you were able to build. But generally speaking, you want people to fly, be independent. And if you've done a good job as a coach or as a mentor, then that's what happens.
Can you give us an example, for example, where, someone, approached you and at some point in his or her career, there was a need, and then you came and, delivered support and let the person fly. And now you can see the difference, and you kind of, empowered the person or released the strengths of the person. And you could see now the person flourishing in their career, but probably also thanks to your support and coaching.
Well, I think, really your intervention is a tiny amount of why people are successful. It's mostly about them. It's about them opening their eyes, opening their mind to the possibilities. It's about them, their talent, their natural or inbuilt talent, as well as their acquired talent over the years. I think it's mostly about individuals, and you make a tiny contribution, and sometimes it's meaningful and sometimes it's less meaningful, but it's really about them. And I make sure they know that, and I think the biggest legacy you could leave as a coach or a mentor is confidence. People have confidence in themselves and in how they make decisions, and in how they treat people, and in the leaders that they want to be. It's well, if you can use legacy, that's legacy.
That's legacy, yeah, absolutely. What about recruitment? I understand you've been, part of the, executive board of Hilton. So your role was also to try to support the recruitment or the replacement from a succession planning point of view of some very important positions in the Hilton. And your views were highly regarded. Can you share with us a little bit, what you've done and your role there?
Yeah, well, I wasn't on the executive board of the global Hilton. I was on the executive team of the Europe, Middle East, Africa region, and I participated in the work of HR Global at Hilton. Well, I think, recruitment, and I think you're in recruitment, Philip, you may have a different view. I don't think it's an exact science, it's a lot about judgment. It's often about intuition. The biggest challenge is to establish fit, isn't it? So you bring in talent, which, that may be technically able and technically experienced, but will they fit into the organization? Will they align to the culture? Will they fit with the rest of the team? Will they make their contribution? We've had a lot of success, but we've also had some failures. And the failures are not because people are not qualified to do the job. It's just that they suddenly arrive and they don't fit into the organization. They don't meld into the culture and how we do what we do at Hilton, and how we like to lead, and how we like to operate, and how we connect with each other, and it's quite difficult to assess up front in the recruitment process whether people are going to be an absolutely perfect fit.
Yeah. Some companies decide to separate from executives who do not really align to their culture. Some companies do that quite quickly, actually. Other companies decide to invest more time to try to help the person to pivot and adapt to the culture. What was, your recent experience about that?
Well, I mean, we've had an experience that stays in my mind, and it was a piece of recruitment during COVID in recruiting a head of technology. And that person was absolutely 100% eminently qualified, came from the right environment, sort of not from hospitality, but a reasonably good fit to hospitality. And, had all the credentials to help us on our journey to continue developing our technology sort of solutions and talent. And it turned out to be an absolute failure. Only because, and maybe COVID had something to do with it, because we didn't interact with each other in the same way for a period of time. But, and we thought about that before making the final decision, but actually didn't really connect in the right way to the organization. I mean, you have to say as an organization, what could we have done differently? What did we not do well enough? And so on and so forth. But at the same time, that it's a senior executive, highly compensated and so on, with a high degree of expectation, and nothing was delivered in the appropriate way within the appropriate time frame. And at the end, we had to separate. And we did a lot of soul searching after that, because you don't want that to happen. For the individual, you don't want it to happen. For the time and cost opportunity missed, you don't want it to happen, and then you have to start again. But it proves the point to me multiple times, not that I didn't know, that, it's not an exact science. You can do the best of your ability as an organization with the help of a recruitment organization, if you use one, to try and understand and make the match. But you know much better than I, Philip, because you've done this for so long at a very high level, that you can only try. It's never an exact science. And some people in your industry would disagree with that view. But
So one of the things that is interesting is that you've been working for large companies, but I have a question that is really of interest for me and for so many people. In some companies, the focus is really on trying to build up the best recruitment team in-house. Okay, that participate to make sure the recruiters are 100% aligned with the corporate culture of the company, guaranteeing full alignment, with regards to, the values and attributes of the people that they recruit. Other companies still rely on executive search and third-party providers for talent acquisition. What is the view in your mind, and based on your experience, what is the ideal mix between, in-house recruitment and relying on third parties?
Well, that's an interesting topic, which, I spent a lot of time in my career thinking about and vacillating between the two sort of extremes, if you will, everything in-house versus everything outsourced. But I concluded towards the end of my executive career, when I worked at Hilton, that there was a big advantage in having a fully functional, not full service, but, almost full service team in-house to recruit, because you had tools available today that you didn't have 10, 15, 20 years ago to research, what's available around the world, the LinkedIns of this world and many others, that slightly devalue the service of an executive search for a lot of the roles, mid-management roles and so on. And we still, towards the end, relied on executive recruitment for the very senior positions, because you had to search in a slightly different way, in a multi-channel way that we didn't always have available to us with our in-house recruitment team. But for most of the talent we needed, we could resource ourselves. It is clearly a cost benefit to doing that as well. So
yeah. When do you decide whether you would do it internally or you'd rely on the third party? What's the decision-making process there?
I think it becomes almost a sort of management level decision in the organization. So, main executive board position, or difficult talent in a highly competitive environment. So in hotels, for example, people who lead the development activity, the growth of the company, or very senior commercial roles, or perhaps niche marketing roles, sort of social media oriented type of multi-level marketing type roles. You might not have the capability in-house to deal with those. And also, big search companies have different types of capabilities to search niches and markets around the world that you may not be able to do. So, these roles would go out to search companies.
Absolutely. So you've seen the evolution of the process of recruitment, the technology. Today, AI, is on the table. So how do you see AI today, and how do you see AI in the future? Is it a threat? Does it bring some positive advantages, or is it really something that is going to revolution the industry? Do we need to be afraid of AI or not?
I don't know that I'm sufficiently an expert in AI to be able to respond to some of those philosophical questions about the future of AI and so on. But I could see benefits certainly in terms of what's available today in business, in simplifying a lot of the mundane tasks, in having access to information more quickly, being able to use that information more intelligently, speeding processes which typically used to be administratively burdensome enormously today. And clearly the threat would be a socio-economic or political threat around, lots of jobs disappearing because AI would do those jobs. But I don't think we should think that way. I think the world of work is changing. AI is certainly initially making a positive contribution. And there's room for people to do different roles that are more value added, less administrative. There's an element of AI doing a lot of analysis as well that might make some other jobs disappear. But I think I see AI such as it exists today in enterprises as a positive influence.
Yeah. I mean, AI in hospitality, on the back office side, yes, definitely. Some processes can be enhanced and probably refined, more efficient in a way. Data management and data analysis perhaps could be quite enhanced. But at the end of the day, from a hospitality point of view, you need to deliver service to the customer in the hotel, in the restaurant. That cannot be done by AI, right? Or robots.
In fact, at Hilton, we often quoted, and our chief executive and all our executives often quoted, that we're a business of people serving people. And we can't imagine that ever being any different. People receiving hospitality want for that hospitality to be delivered by people.
You see robots coming to you and serve you at the table and take your luggage to the room.
I don't think I'll be around when that happens. Because people want to engage with people delivering hospitality, have a conversation, have a chat, and people delivering hospitality also want to engage with the customers, so it's I don't think we'll see that for a while.
Yeah, interesting. That's very interesting. Okay, you mentioned HR transformation as well. So I understand that you also contribute to to support some clients that need some review and revamping a little bit their people agenda. So are you doing, some support, and are you helping them? Also, what's your view? And have you done that in the past? Are you transferring that expertise?
Yeah, I think, certainly in the last 15 or 20 years of my career, I did quite a lot of work which had to do with culture, and at the core had to do with leadership, leadership development, leadership enhancement, leadership definition, and so on. And so in one or two of the projects I've taken on, in the last year or so, which are to do with culture, I talk very strongly about the biggest agent for culture change is the quality of your leadership. And I did a little project recently in Southeast Asia, which ended with a masterclass on how you build culture. Because often people think, it's a wonderful world. We talk about culture, positive culture, supporting culture, inclusive culture, and all these things. But and then we sort of put that on a piece of paper that we then communicate around the enterprise, which contains a definition of your purpose, your mission, your vision, your perhaps even the definition of your culture through your values, all of those things. And often organizations think that's the end of it. You put that in a nice presentation, you go around the world of your business, you present it to everyone, goodbye, see you again next year. But actually, that's just the beginning, because then you have to execute on it. And that's at the core of success, is the ability to execute on your culture. And that's all about leadership.
It's all about leadership. And here you can see also some degree of limitations of consultancies. There is a big controversy right now about consulting companies that, have been flagged, to overly rely on AI generation of turnaround transformation plans and strategy transformation plans. So it's interesting what you just said about the implementation, because at the end of the day, having a plan that is, a blueprint is something, but implementing it on a day-to-day basis and make sure it cascaded down to the whole team is something different. What was your experience, if you remember one of the perhaps biggest achievements that you did from as an input, as a positive input for transforming the environment, you were leading and implementing some programs. So can you share with us one or two examples of what you did, for example, for the Hilton, in order to improve, the operations and perhaps from an HR point of view?
Well, I think, it's difficult to go into some of those and be too descriptive and too overt about them, because there's an element of confidentiality about some of the work that I've done. But actually, what I've tried to do with some success is to just instill the principles that, you could get really excited about, culture change or transformation, but actually what you should be excited about is implementing as a leader your part in the transformation. So it could be, quite fundamentally reviewing or sort of assessing how you lead. I used to have a principle for most of my career, which is about leadership, which is, you have to treat people the same way you would want to be treated. And I was challenged one time. It was at a conference event on a panel by another person on the panel saying, actually, my motto is to treat people as they want to be treated. Because it's almost quite sort of pretentious to say, I'm going to treat people in the way I want to be treated, because it's me. That's how I want to be treated. It doesn't mean that's how they want to be treated. So and underlying that principle was, to be an effective leader, you have to get to know your people. Take an interest in your people. Get to know a little bit who they are as human beings, what challenges they have in their personal lives, who they have to look after, their children, their partner, their parents, all these things. And if you take an interest in people, you're halfway through becoming an effective leader, because if people feel their boss is interested in them, they're going to do more. They're going to deliver more. They're going to be more linked to the purpose of the organization, and so on and so forth. So, that's a basic principle, but underlying transformation is instilling those principles about leadership in those who will have to implement the change. And if you can achieve that, then you have a better chance of successful transformation.
How do you see employee engagement in the Middle East per se? I mean, is it something that you believe is commonly implemented across the hospitality sector, or do you think that the industry still has some work to do on employee engagement?
I think it's improved immensely beyond recognition over the past 15 to 20 years in the Middle East. Starting with the UAE and then going into KSA and the other Emirates. And I think it comes from a necessity, because you had to compete in a global talent marketplace. So you had to go away from the perception, which wasn't always true, but there was a perception that people were brought into the Middle East and were exploited, paying a very small salary, worked in very bad conditions, all these things that were around, 20 odd years ago, to a world where it's now competitively a much better marketplace. The countries have protective employment laws that protect the rights of employees. The conditions of employment are much better. The principles of inclusivity have always existed here, but they're even enhanced. And I think it's a great place to work, the Middle East. And it's globally competitive, where before it wasn't.
It wasn't. And what triggered that? I mean, you mentioned some elements like, some government regulations. Was it more, in your eyes, from the government regulations or from the input of what companies put forward as a philosophy of work implemented on a daily basis?
I think it's both. The governments in the Middle East recognizing that their ambition to be globally important, globally relevant, and globally competitive meant that they had to have laws and regulations and protection available to employees that were globally competitive. So the credit has to go to governments there, but also the credit has to go to enterprises, private and local government too, that decided they wanted to appeal to talent from around the world in a much more inclusive and deep way than they might have done 20 years ago.
Interesting. So you see that correlation between, what the government has done, especially in Saudi Arabia, for example. We have seen such a dramatic change. Have you been in contact with, or have you been in relationship with some hospitality schools or universities, in order to do some joint programs or partnerships?
I have over my career done, quite a bit of work with hotel schools in particular and universities with a tourism management or hotel school degree. Done visiting presentations and so on. And I've continued to do a little bit of that, not a lot, but a little bit, if I get invited to share some of my experiences and, perhaps even wisdom with students or the academic staff, that I'm very happy to do that. And I've done a little bit of it.
Very good. So today, what you're doing today is really, if I understand correctly, you're doing very selective type of support from a coaching and mentoring point of view. You have a few clients of HR transformation, maybe also some works with academia, right, where you can just try to transfer your expertise. So where are you based? You're based in the UK, but you come very often in the Middle East, right?
Yes, well, I'm based in the UK, just outside London. I travel a little bit, do a little work in different places. And I do come to the Middle East from time to time, but I confess it's probably more for leisure than for business, because I've lived in Kuwait and I've lived in Dubai, and I have friends in those places, and my wife and I like to visit here.
Very good. So if you had to give some advice, I mean, for HR professionals, that are, thinking about having such a long and successful career, what would you say to them?
Goodness, that's such a deep philosophical question. Do we have another hour?
In a nutshell, because I'm sure that we have, in the audience, we have a lot of HR professionals, and, it's inspirational, right? So the idea is to try to listen to what you think work and what doesn't work, and what were the levers really that make a career work in HR.
I think, if I was to go back to my own thinking about HR, I always thought I had a great advantage in that I wasn't trained as an HR professional. I fell into it. I was in the business, in operations, and someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Oh, you speak a few languages and you're good at communication, and we have a job in training for you." And they'd be traveling around the world training all these hotels, general managers and management teams and so on. And I said yes, even though that wasn't my objective at the time. My objective was to become a general manager of a hotel, and I had dreams of managing the Savoy or the Grosvenor House, or some of the big London hotels. So I would say to people wanting to develop a career in HR, go with that flow, but remember that HR is a business function. It's wonderful that we work with people and we help people achieve their goals and so on and so forth. But you are one of the business function. If you're ambitious in HR, you have to consider yourself a business leader at the same time as your commercial leaders, your operations leader, your finance leaders, and so on at the same level. The moment you allow for HR to be devalued in a way, because we're about the people, we're about the nicey, we're about the admin, all those kinds of things, which by the way you have to do and do well, then you'll struggle to get your seat at the top table. And the language at the top table is a language of business. It's a language of numbers. It's a language of profits and cost management and cash flows and all those things. And if you don't educate yourself around that language, then you won't have that seat for very long. So that's the advice I would give to HR people. Remember, you can be all the things you want to be about people and HR and development and helping people achieve their goals, but you're also a business leader.
That's amazing. Ben, thank you very much. It was amazing talking to you again, as always, and really thankful for all your input in this conversation. So thank you, Ben.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Philip. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.